If you're awkward at a party, how much easier is it to be like, if I just had the right outfit, or if my belly were just flatter and I could have worn those jeans, maybe I'd be more well-liked. Maybe I would fit in more. Maybe, it gives us, we almost call it like this, the hope and self-hate. That when we get this fantasy of what we could be when we're in a situation that feels icky, then we feel like we have something that we can work on. It's really, really compelling.
Today I have a really interesting guest for our conversation. It's Deb Schachter. She's a licensed social worker and has been working in the areas of body image and eating disorders for over 30 years. And she uses this really interesting approach that helps people develop some new skills and resources around interacting with their body image. And in our conversation, I learned a ton of new ways to think with and interact with these thoughts or feelings of negative body image. She and Whitney Otto wrote an awesome book called Body Image Inside Out, and today we're going to be talking about that. So really excited to talk about this, and let's jump in. Well, thank you, Deb, so much for joining us. Really excited to talk about body image with you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So give us an introduction. I'll back up just a little bit already. I'm backing myself up. I once had a client. This was probably 2013, a while ago. Okay. I had a client and I was new as a therapist, and they're like, man, I hate my body. I hate how I look. I hate all these parts of me. I hate this part of my body. I hate this part of my body. I hate this part of my body. She's like, what do I do with that? And I'm like, and I literally had no skills other than just listening, reflecting, validating skills. I literally had zero skills. Do you think that's common? A lot of people just don't know what to do with negative body image?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, it's part of why we wrote the book. I think people think this work is so gross. That work just sounds so scary. I think as clinicians, people feel really overwhelmed. That's what I've found, especially as I've been doing podcasts or, trainings with different sort of mental health communities and stuff. People get really freaked out about it because I think we all have bodies, we all have feelings about them, and we haven't been taught how to talk about it in a productive way anywhere, right? We're taught how to hate them, we're taught how to fix them, but we are not taught how to understand what's happening. And that's really obviously what Whitney and I are really passionate about. So to answer your question, yes, I think people get really freaked out. I mean, even when I've met with clinical groups, outside of sort of the eating disorder world, it's been so interesting. People are like, oh God, I hate when this comes up. I don't know what to say. And it's interesting. I didn't mean to put a plug right in the beginning, but we're actually doing a training in the fall for clinicians because I think people really want to know how to do this differently and to have it feel like, what our really goal was from the get-go when we started doing the workshops was more fun, laughter, curiosity, creativity, things that you wouldn't necessarily associate with body image. So that was all to say, yes, I think people get really freaked out and it doesn't have to be so awful, but again, we're not taught that. I certainly wasn't taught that in grad school at all. So
not even touched I think a lot of people not even once.
Maybe a day on eating disorders if we were lucky.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Interesting. I think a lot of people think, well, negative body image is something that we need to make go away. What do you think about that?
Totally. And it absolutely. And I think, that's part of the dilemma as clinicians. When I did a training a couple of weeks ago, this therapist said, I'm so relieved I don't have to fix it. And I thought, oh, interesting. So, we think we need to fix depression or anxiety, and we can't fix this because we live in bodies and they're always changing. And, as I'm sure we'll get into, they change for lots of reasons because of so many things happening around us. And it's a practice like any other, mindfulness or yoga or any of those things. We're constantly changing. So there's no way we can just fix the body image and it's put it back on the shelf. It's much more, we believe, of something that you are working on over time because it's so connected to things that are ever changing, like our moods, like what's happening around us.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So maybe seeing, I think a lot of people maybe see negative body image as this, thing that has to be fought and thing that has to be battled against and fixed. and you're saying like, maybe there's a different way to look at this. Like
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, we're actually looking at it as really important information about ourselves. So when it spikes, when it gets really loud is kind of the language that we use, there's a reason. And if we either ignore it or, obviously lean into it, which is what we've been socialized to do, we miss some really important information. So, we have 3 muscles that we talk about, and I can get into those if you'd like. But one of them is curiosity, because if we just start to notice, oh, it got louder, I wonder why. There's so much more to learn about that. So that's where it gets, I think, more fun and interesting, rather than just like, I think about my body, I feel bad. I'm all set with that thinking circle. Thank you very much.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so how can we see body image or those thoughts and feelings we have about our body as a messenger? How can we see that as a communication?
Exactly.
Yeah. How would you describe that process? Like, so I'm like, oh, today I was playing pickleball, and I'm like, man, I have put on some weight since winter. It's been a rough winter. And I look at my belly and I'm like, I have an initial kind of like, ugh. And then I'm like, you know what? It's cool. I'm 40. Like, whatever. But like, how would you interpret those messages in a way that's like, oh, let's listen to this instead of like, this is so bad? What would you say?
Great question. And even in your example, right? Like, you did a beautiful job of being like, yeah, there's some reasons for this. That's okay. It makes sense. That in itself is skillful, right? To even be like, give it some context, understand a little bit more about why it's there. For you, it sounds like you were able to not have it sort of hijack you and take over the whole day or the game or whatever. But I guess what I might add on to that is, it may be in that moment, it felt sort of like, meh, it's okay. There might be another moment for you. I mean, I imagine you've done a fair amount of work, so maybe not. But I think for many of us, there may be times where like, meh, not my favorite, or geez, these pants didn't fit the way they did last year. And there can be times where it's meaner, louder, more intense. And that's where we want to start really developing more curiosity. Sometimes it wasn't even there, right? Maybe we're just going through our day, not thinking about it. And all of a sudden we're like, I feel like these just pants look awful on me or something. So that's when we really want to start to look at what might have changed. We talk about it as inside out curiosity and outside in curiosity. So inside out curiosity is this idea like, what happens around us? Did I just have a crummy phone call with a family member? Did I just, have a difficult session with a client where I felt like I didn't know what I was doing? Whatever. What may be happening outside me that may be kind of tweaking things? And that sort of offness, what often happens is when something out there feels gunky and uncomfortable, what can often happen, again, partly because of how we're socialized in this culture, and partly because our bodies feel what we feel, that something about us is wrong and needs to be fixed. So starting to track, I didn't love these pants when I wore them last week, but it was okay. And now I just feel really critical. That's one of our muscles, this one we call mindful awareness, which is just noticing with the attitude, right? Just being like, interesting. This got louder. I wonder what that's about. So we say mindful awareness opens the door and curiosity invites us in. So starting to build this practice of tracking, again, sort of the ebbs and flows of it, and especially noticing when it may get louder, when something else is feeling tender or feeling vulnerable, and starting to make that connection, how they may be intersecting in some way.
Interesting. So if someone's feeling a lot of negative thoughts, negative intensity about their body, or really just a lot of hateful thoughts
critical
toward themselves.
Yeah.
Then you would say, well, there are skills that you can use that are going to help you work through this in a healthier way. One of the first ones is curiosity, just being curious.
Number 1 is the mindful awareness. So that's baseline. Yeah, baseline. Yeah. It's like, and again, think about the difference between God, my body just is so ugly. These, my thighs are just awful. Some sort of blah, blah, blah. My belly, so blah, 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 whatever it is. Often bellies get the judgment. And starting to say that in a different way, right? Which would just be like, wow, my body image is getting louder. Or even, I'm saying really mean things to myself. How different is that than my butt is so flat and can't look good in anything or something, right? Those are very different. So
yeah,
that's
so say my butt
1.
is my butt is so flat, I hate it. And then you switch it. I'm having the thought I'm having the thought that my butt is so flat and I hate it. And that's like already creating some room,
Exactly.
some space.
Then you get a little space. My thoughts about my butt are getting really intense or loud, or I'm saying mean things to myself. Whitney describes it, my co-author. It's almost like the weather report. Like, this is what's happening. My body image is loud. And for most of us, just getting that space is a big deal because we can so easily get in that loopy-loop. So that's number one. Number two is the curiosity. I mentioned kind of what's happening around me that might be kind of bringing this up, and we really dive into that into more depth over the course of the book. You know, this idea that there's so much to learn about what's happening around us and how that's actually informing how we're seeing ourselves. And then the other piece of that is what we call inside out curiosity, which is if I'm judging myself, if I'm comparing to others, if I'm feeling really jealous of someone, what is in them that I'm wanting? So if we all of a sudden find ourselves, you know, at the pickleball court being like, God, that woman just has the best thighs, or that guy just has such great arms, or whatever, really digging into that, that's one of our favorites, is sort of like what's happening in their, like, sort of in our experience of them that we're drawn to. So sure, it might be they have great quads or whatever, but usually that's going to be associated with something that goes beyond their thighs or their arms or whatever it is. And so that is a whole other way to dig into what does some of this either jealousy or comparison, which happens so often, telling us about what actually we want. Like, wow, she has these really strong thighs. What do we imagine that the life that goes with those strong thighs feels like?
Yeah, so would that be something like, oh, I see someone with really strong thighs, and then it could be something like, man, I wish I had self-discipline to work out every day. Or if someone has really great thighs, they must have a great partner who loves them. I wish I had someone who loved me.
Yep. How does their life feel with those thighs is how we talk about it.
Okay,
so it's like,
oh,
I was watching this woman, of course, on Instagram the other day who was like doing some epic jumping. I can't even imagine. It was so awesome. And she was so strong. And I was like, I don't even want that body, but I love the way she moves, right? Like, she's so strong. So it might just be, I mean, that's a little bit more superficial, but still, I was like, wow, to have that freedom in her body, what's that like? You know, to be able to jump from one of those high pads back up and forth down and, you know, in a squat. I was like, that's amazing. But to your point, really at the essence of it is, what does their life feel like? What would their life feel like with those thighs? So it might be strong, grounded. For me, it would be, as I said, it was work connected to like, a way of moving their body, being able to exercise.
Like, how would that feel? Like, that would feel so free and fun.
Exactly.
To like be able to jump like that. And I look at that too. Like, I'm 40 now, so I'm like, oh, I used to be able to run around and play soccer and frisbee, and now if I do that, my back hurts. So how would that feel to be able to just run and not worry about my back hurting?
Exactly. And there's some grief there, right? So even saying, oh, I have some grief that I can't move my body in the way that I used to move my body. Wow, this is hard. You know, this is, and that's the last muscle. I mean, there are many muscles, but really those primary three is the compassion, right? Like, if you could say to yourself, wow, I'm focusing on this woman's thighs. Let's just pretend it's your thighs, that, you know, that your legs are really stiff or something and it's hard to exercise, or your back or whatever. But sort of like, wow, like, I actually have some big feelings about the way my body's been feeling as I move, especially with exercise and pickleball. So what does that mean? Like, what can I do about that? Can I create some more space for what that feels like? And again, it's not always easy, but I think to move from, God, that woman's thighs are just so perfect, to, wow, when I imagine this person that I'm playing with having this real freedom in their bodies, I'm kind of tapping into some stuff in me that probably needs some more attention.
Ooh, I love that frame, because a lot of body image is triggered by comparison and jealousy. And what you're saying is, like, if we notice that comparison, we notice that jealousy, and instead of being so focused on like getting or having or comparing or feeling better or feeling worse than someone else, we say, like, what is this deeper need that I'm wishing for?
Exactly. And
how can I at least treat that need or wish with compassion, like awareness, and like sit with it? Or can I take action toward it?
maybe I could do some more body work or explore some PT. So maybe my back might feel different. I mean, obviously it depends on the thing and all that, right? Yeah. It could be, I just need to talk about this more. I really want to talk to my friends about how they're feeling in their bodies as they're moving into their 40s. So that's what we talk about a lot, is how easy it is to get in these loops. And we really offer these muscles to sort of interrupt those loops, to start to bring that curiosity and be like, whoa, what's happening? And then start to ask that question, how do I resource myself now that I know that I'm really envying this person? We call them a pedestal person, and we have them actually break it down, because most people are like ashamed they feel jealous. I shouldn't feel jealous. This is so silly. Why do I do this? And we're kind of saying, lean into that. Let's see it as a teacher. And let's do some writing about it. And so we have people unpack their pedestal person. And it's so often about other emotional stuff, especially if their body were stronger, they would feel more confident. They could set more boundaries. They would trust themselves more. That kind of stuff is so often what comes up when you actually get into what they're sort of envying in these other folks.
Interesting.
So it really becomes like moving away from how we usually feel, which is not only it feels crappy to feel jealous, and then we feel ashamed, like I shouldn't feel jealous. I'm 40 years old and I shouldn't be thinking about this woman's perfect butt or whatever. Instead of saying, this makes sense, and wow, I actually really am kind of sad about this, and what might be helpful.
I love it. Because I think
I'm so glad.
It's like really interesting for me to think about these different approaches and resources when it comes to working with body image. You know, I've read some things since then, and I think there's a lot of stuff out there.
We're saying something a little different for sure, and I don't mean that in a show-offy way. Just in a I think right now there's a lot of encouragement to go sort of towards either neutrality or positivity, which are great tools. They're awesome.
Sure.
And what we're sort of saying is you may miss out, just like if you're into meditating, right? And you just are like, oh, if they're dark feelings or negative feelings, I'm just not going to like breathe into those, right? Like there is something really important that's happening here, and we don't want people to miss it.
I love that, because that's what I was kind of trying to describe, is like maybe 40 years ago we were unaware of like how toxic we were about our bodies, right? So we swung all the way from like women should be stick thin and always perfect and look beautiful, whatever. And then people are like, ooh, that's toxic. Well, let's swing all the way over here to like, if you have thoughts like that, just stop it and just love yourself 100%, which is always like pure positivity, body positivity. I saw an article that was like how to talk to your daughter about her body, and it was like, Don't mention her body. Don't talk about her body. Like, don't talk if she's gained weight. Don't talk if she's lost weight. Don't talk if she's strong. Don't talk if she's weak. Just don't talk about it. And I'm like, okay, that might be slightly better than like, that is better than like criticizing
It is better
their body.
than, right, you should look like this. But
you should look like this, judging their body. Like, you should eat less. You should watch what you eat. Like, blah, 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 like all that toxic stuff. But just completely ignoring it is also like, well, fine. Like, that's a tool that works for 10 minutes. Right. Exactly.
And especially in the culture we live in, right? So where they're getting these messages in other places. So the more that we can help them, and Whitney and I always talk about, our wish would be that we all get to the day where people are like, oh, your body image is loud. What do you think's going on? Like, that's like normal, you know? Like, that's our wish. And that's what I talk about when we talk about talking to the kids is, sort of starting to make those connections. Like, oh, that's, if they come home and say, I felt really like, I hate my body. I don't look good in this dress. I'm going to this party. Let's talk about the party. Who's going to be at the party? Why might you think that maybe some of the feelings that you're having about this dress that you're wearing are actually about other stuff, and getting them to start to develop that curiosity? Because often people are very, tempted to be like, oh, that's so silly. You look so beautiful. Then you miss, it's wonderful, but you miss, there's something they're sitting with that they need to be, understanding more, even if it's something simple. Like, I'm thinking of a friend's daughter who really hates dresses. And that just doesn't feel right to her. So her saying, I know I need to, because it's a, whatever I'm saying, think of something where she would have to for, like, they're going to church or something. But to say, like, it makes sense that this doesn't feel right to you. And that might feel really kind of disconnected. And that's important to honor that, even though sometimes we may need to wear certain things or whatever. But, is there a way we can make you feel more comfortable? Is there, let's talk about it when you're there. If you feel, that might even translate into sensations. That's why a lot of people we really encourage to think about how our sensations in our body often make us kind of feel things about our body.
Yeah. Can you give some examples of that? Okay, first off, I want to say this is excellent because I have a 10-year-old daughter who is... So I was like never appearance oriented. Like I just did not care. It was like a part of my brain that never turned on. I don't know.
Yeah,
and my daughter
great.
is like, she loves it. She loves dressing cute. She loves dressing fancy. Like she loves all that, which is great. I'm thrilled for her that she has this skill that I do not have. But she also comes home and is like, oh, Mom, I'm like, da-da-da-da-da. And she'll say something negative about herself and I'll be like, I think I've tried to be like, oh, like, why do you feel this way? Or your body, like, your body's more than just to be seen. You're not just an object. What you've described is like, hey, let's get curious and see, like, oh, are you feeling like you're looking for belonging? Like, maybe that's something a little deeper here.
Yeah,
or you're looking to
exactly.
express your identity, or like you're looking to, and so like, looking for some of these underlying emotions. Gives me another line of like, let's explore this. Like, let's just be curious instead of me just jumping right to like encouragement, you know?
Exactly. And even if you just be curious, which I know can probably feel really counterintuitive, if they're like, I hate how I look in this, blah, 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 to lean into that and be like, can you just tell me more? You know, try not to jump into like, you know, because I think it's so tempting to be like, oh, it must be because there was someone at the party who made you feel bad. But even to just be like, tell me more. And she's like, well, you know, this is where this is where I don't like the way it looks, or it's itchy, or it's, you know, I just don't feel like my, you know, and I love listening for the words and seeing what words. I actually have a whole section in the book about decoding, which I love, which sounds so silly. But when you actually get people to use their language about how they're feeling in their bodies, there are often some really great cues that you can kind of start to hook into. And in the book, we kind of walk you through that, like particularly, you know, of certain kinds of adjectives or adverbs where you start to notice like, oh, like you just said, you just mentioned the belonging. So often people will end up saying, it doesn't fit. I don't feel like it fits. And I'm like, where else is the fit not happening? Why now are they thinking about fit? You know, or, you know, I can't find anything to wear to this party. All the dresses I tried on don't fit. Who's at the party? What's this party about? How do you feel about going to the party? It often is really connected. So like you said, just really bringing that curiosity is right on.
So if someone says, oh, like, I can't find anything that fits, I hate all my clothes, I have nothing to wear, and I can't go to this party, you might be like, let's be curious. Is this about connection and belonging? Like, is this about feeling?
I wouldn't even lead that much.
Right, I wouldn't say that, but you might think that and then wonder,
bingo.
Just wonder.
Exactly. I'm just listening for the words, so I'm starting to like put them on stickies in my brain a little bit.
Sure.
And then I would say, I would just get curious about how they're feeling about the event. So tell me more about the event, who's going to be there, what's it like to imagine being there? Definitely some somatic stuff, like when you talk about the event, like where do you feel it in your body? And usually it will just come through in its own natural way. You know, if we're kind of talking, I will certainly say it's so interesting. I keep hearing you talk about, like I had one client a couple weeks ago who was talking about when she used to fit in clothes when she was, before she had kids, she was like, everything was the same. I'm like, what is she talking about? But she's like, you know, it's like the line was the same. I'm like, what does that even mean? But what she was talking about was sort of the way that her hips really shifted and never went back. And sure, some of that is like, wow, my body's really different. But what that meant to her in terms of growing up with a mom that had a much curvier body who was unwell. And, you know, there was all this other stuff that got associated. So when I was thinking about, okay, the same, what's the same versus different? You know, I'm sort of tracking those words and thinking about it. And, you know, it was in a group actually. And I said, well, so tell me about something like the same and things being different and growing up. And she was like, my mom was always changing. My mom's mood was always changing, you know, things. And she was in this really curvy body. So that's gotten connected. So yeah, just, I think starting with them telling the story and then potentially just putting a little bit of, you know, sprinkle that on there. Like, oh, you said fit like 10 times. What do you think when you hear me say fit? What do you know, what does that land for you? It's just kind of interesting to see what they'll do with it. Yeah.
Okay, so you have these thoughts, you like create a little space around those thoughts, you get curious and you wonder, I wonder what the underlying, you know, meaning or emotions might be connected to these thoughts. And then you said you've used the word lean in quite a bit and you've used the word like sensations. Can you give an example like of a client or just an example of how someone might move into their body and not so much in their head when it comes to like working through body image stuff?
One of the ways that we think about it is when we have big emotions, there are big sensations that come with them, right? So we talk a lot in the book about relationships and what comes up in relationships, both historically, growing up, but even in the here and now. So let's say, you go out to lunch with your father-in-law when he's in town and it doesn't feel great. You feel a little kind of like you kind of can't get a word in, or you feel like he's not really that interested, or maybe, a little critical or something. So you're feeling icky. Mm-hmm. And often what we have found, we do it kind of in the inverse. We're kind of tracing it back, but is when we're feeling something in our body, it could be icky. It could be like if you asked someone, like, what are the sensations? We actually have a list that we give people that are like bodies. So it might be like a crawly or scratchy or, or frozen or cold, or what often starts as a body sensation can very easily morph into feeling like, oh, something in my body doesn't feel right, to something about my body isn't right. Mm-hmm. Because we live in this culture that constantly says, if you're in the right body, you're going to feel better. So if we leave something and it feels crummy and we're like, what do I do with that? It's so easy to then be like, this skirt just looks awful. I can't even fit in the clothes I used to try to wear. So it's often going from what we feel in our body to what we feel about our body without any awareness of that. And often when people say things like, I literally feel like I am getting fatter in this session, I'll have people say, like, I feel like my hands are getting fatter. It sounds so crazy, but if you think about, there's some big feelings happening in this body, and it so easily can kind of just channel itself into the body image. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's interesting. I'm thinking and I'm learning as you talk.
Yeah, I think it's a lot to take in. So feel free to slow me down. Or
I think one of the things that comes up for me is like, well, maybe someone goes to a social interaction and they feel awkward, like they feel uncomfortable. Maybe that would show up in their body by being like, oh, a little bit like I want to hide a little bit, or I'm like, don't really know what to do with my body. And then they would create this label, like I must be a socially awkward person. Like that must be who I am. Like nobody wants to talk to me. I must have been so awkward. Everyone must have noticed. And I think that starts with awkward could be an emotion, but it can also be a sensation. So when we say sensations, like somatically, we're talking about what is your body saying, right? And then, so you're saying someone might have an experience and their body has a physical sensation. They don't quite know what to do with that sensation. They know it feels a little off. And then the brain comes up with an interpretation that's like, I must be so fat. I must be fat. Is that kind of what you're describing?
Yeah, exactly. And I would say all of this is happening unconsciously, but like something must be wrong with me.
So,
and part of what's right. And what's so compelling about it is then there's something to fix. Mm-hmm. Right.
So then, so something feels off. Something must be wrong with me. That's a common interpretation that the brain makes all the time. What's wrong with me? This must be my fault. Yeah.
Totally.
Because, our brain is a meaning maker. It doesn't mean it's accurate. Right?
Totally. So, and what we talk about with the relationship stuff is often we've learned that at a certain age. We started what I call shape-shifting, which is even before the body image stuff, just like you said, when we're in environments or certain relationships, we may kind of, try and make ourselves fit to be, whatever, to be really easy or to be funny or to, let them talk and talk and talk about themselves or whatever it might be. And this is sort of layers of it, but how when we develop those patterns, that can start to really play out in our body and our body image. Ways that we've sort of learned to kind of be a certain way. So I think your question was a great one. If you're awkward at a party, how much easier is it to be like, if I just had the right, outfit, or if my belly were just flatter and I could have worn this, those jeans, maybe I'd be more well liked. Maybe I would fit in more. Maybe, it gives us, we almost call it like this, the hope and self-hate. That when we get this fantasy of what we could be when we're in a situation that feels icky, then we feel like we have something that we can work on. It's really, really compelling. And I think, again, it doesn't have to be eating disordered. It could just be like, this is just hard. I was actually thinking about a client last week who was seeing her dad, who's, she's a really, really challenging relationship with. And she was saying, if I don't keep kind of trying to control my body the way I'm controlling it, or sort of, really orienting it around being in a certain body, then I'm going to feel bigger feelings when I'm with him. But if I'm with him and he acts like a jerk, and I kind of know I have this little secret weapon that makes me feel a little bit more grounded, a little bit better about myself, because he'll often kind of ignore what I'm asking for or what I'm needing, then I feel a little bit less yucky.
Is the secret weapon that she's like controlled her eating or controlled her exercise in some way? Like she's taking care of her body in some way. So that gives her this sense of like, well,
she's
at least
in recovery from an eating disorder, but she's sort of in a place where she knows she's probably not nourishing her body as well as she could. And there's like this little extra tool. We kind of mapped it out together. Like, oh, if you have that knowledge that you're a little bit more in a body that feels a little bit more empowering to you, then sitting with your dad doesn't feel quite as gross.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. It's cool. I love how you're explaining how what seems like, oh, you should just stop feeling bad about yourself is actually like, oh, this is connected to some really important things. Love, connection, belonging, self-worth, freedom, power.
Totally.
Yeah.
Being seen and understood. Particularly the connection around the relationship piece, because we've been doing these workshops for 20 years, but we hadn't really made this very obvious connection that what about body image isn't about a relationship in some way. It could be, my college reunion. It could be seeing my father-in-law, whatever it is. It could be, being at school and, are we struggling with, keeping up? But it's still about how are we seen? How are we understood? Our sense of ourselves, our sense of identity. And that was the chapter we didn't know existed. And when we wrote it, we were like, oh my gosh, like what about body image is not about something relationally, right? And so really starting to track that and get people curious when you leave an interaction and you feel bad, like what's happening, and maybe what are you really, especially if you're feeling like, I was thinking of a client, we had this great conversation about, she's like, even my underwear felt tight. We've been doing this work together for a long time, but she was like, everything felt tight, even my underwear. And we were like kind of having a chuckle. She's like, I don't know what happened at that dinner, but man, did I feel crummy. And, sort of starting to track that stuff. And when you leave an interaction and you start to be really focused on your body in that way, again, we all have ebbs and flows, but when it starts to get loud, there's usually a reason. And that can go on for long periods of time. It may be it's a solution in some ways for some other problem. Our parents are getting divorced, and it's way easier to think about, if I can just nail this, fill in the blank, if I can be this, great body, and then, whatever that brings me, I'll never have a marriage like theirs. I mean, there are all ways that could go, right?
Oh, it's so cool. Well, is there an aspect of CBT? Like, how do you integrate CBT? And I've heard you use internal family systems. Like, is this all integrated into your approach? How do you do that?
It is. It's funny. I would say I'm more the internal family systems gal, but I'm going to do my best. What I would say about the CBT is, and I actually can probably even show you in the book, but basically we came up, do you know what a rotary is? Do you guys have rotaries where like, it's basically when, they have them a lot in Europe and we have them a ton here. It's in cities where there isn't a lot of room, so they have to be creative. But basically it's this idea where you get to like an intersection and streets, and instead of like, there's two streets that cross, there's basically you enter and there's kind of this loop that goes round and round, and then you have all these choices of which road that you take. And
roundabout, we call it.
Oh, roundabout. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So, which is actually what I think they call them in like England or something. But what we do, this was one of our first things we ever did, was we started to have people map their roundabouts. So if at the top of the roundabout, I was just looking for the picture in here. At the top of the roundabout is whatever the event is, right? And that's sort of like CBT. It's like, okay, so tough dinner with parents. And then next stop, big feelings. Next stop, body stuff is starting to kick in. Next stop, what can I do about it? Next stop, totally lost track of bad dinner with parents. We're just moving now on the like, how can I change my body and how am I going to feel better? And we're not even thinking about where the original hurt was. So what we actually do is, and I think it's called a behavior chain analysis in CBT, when you do that kind of tracking and you're tracking sort of how the thoughts that are popping after each thought. And so we're doing the same thing, but we're giving you a chance to actually what we call get off the rotary. So once we start to like get in that fantasy land about our bodies and we think, oh, I'm doing it, I'm what we call a bad body image moment. That's a BIM. We're like, oh, I'm in a BIM. I'm in a bad body image moment. It's happening. Then that's when we bring in mindful awareness, curiosity. So it's like that's the practice that we're trying to really change that loop.
Cool.
So that's the CBT. Yeah. And it's really fun when you have people map, because everyone has their own unique thing, right? Like whatever it is, it's usually, pick your body part or pick something that's like, oh, this is where I go. And then I start to, say I just finally joined the gym, even though I hate the gym, there's a whole loop. So getting people to really know see what's happening and then start to interrupt it is awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So can you walk me through like any somatic or mindful exercises? Like, is there something like imagining people out there listening to this don't have access to therapy and they maybe have a moment where they're like, I hate my stomach. Or like this morning, I didn't say that, but like I was playing pickleball and I was like, man, my stomach is big. What would you do somatically or mindfully with that situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, A would just be to slow it down. I mean, that's why we always start with the mindful awareness, just to slow it down and start to say to ourselves, I'm in what we call a BIM, a bad body image moment. I'm having a BIM, which I know sounds kind of cheesy, but even starting to do that, I was just thinking there was a couple of weeks ago, my husband was going to some event where he was presenting at some conference thing, and he was freaking out about the fact that he couldn't find any shirts that fit because he hasn't been able to work out as much this winter, and all the shirts were yellow around the collar. Anyway, he was having a meltdown a bit. And all of a sudden he was like, I'm having a BIM. And I was like, oh my God, it was awesome. But he was right. Because he kept saying, I just look so crappy. I mean, part of it was the shirts weren't fitting, but it was really about a bigger thing. It was really about this, he was presenting in this really big audience. He had like 8 minutes to give his talk or something. So starting to slowing it down is huge. Starting to bring that noticing.
I can think of a time for myself. I was out working with a youth group out in the desert, and I was like kept talking about my tan lines because I was really worried about my tan lines. We're outside all like for 8 days, and right after that shift, my younger sister was getting married, and she was getting married before I was getting married. Right
there, you go. So, that's it.
That was it, right? Like I was and the kids in the group kept like, man, you sure are making a big deal about tan lines. I normally do not care about tan lines, but I had to wear a different dress, right? At my little sister's wedding. And it really, like the reason I normally do not care about tan lines, but the reason I cared was that, my little sister's getting married before I am, and that's really what it was about.
I love that. It's such a great example. We actually call weddings the Super Bowl of body image for that reason.
Weddings and high school reunions. But yeah, you don't have to wear such a small dress at a high school reunion, I guess.
Totally. And there's so much stuff. I mean, whether you're the bride, the sister of the bride, we have a whole chapter on clothing because this stuff is a lot. I was thinking when you said tan lines, I was like, finish lines? Who's crossing the finish line first? It's just fun to start to think about this stuff. Or she's moving past you. I mean, there's, that's such a great example, right? On another day, you might have been like, oh, I'm going to have weird tan lines. And I get part of it was about the wedding, but there was clearly there's other stuff. I love that. That's a beautiful example. Exactly. Yeah. That's it right there.
So if someone's sitting with their body and they're like, man, I hate my body, I hate my body, I hate my body. Would you be like, okay, would you ask them, be like, can you just spend a minute with the sensations? Like, can you spend a minute with what your body feels like? Do you have them at themselves?
Yep.
How do you have them? Okay.
So I would say, I think that's a great question. I mean, it would obviously depend on the person, but I would say I might start actually with just having them write the words. I think that can be really helpful. If they're really in it. It depends. If they're like, oh my God, like all of a sudden yesterday, blah, blah, blah. If it feels more like a BIM, I might go for like what just happened. Like, oh, that's so interesting. You said last week you were fine, and all of a sudden this weekend you started to really get in a funk about your body. Let's talk about the end of last week, or let's track things a little bit more. But like if someone's just really hating on their body, I think I would probably have them write out the thoughts and do that in take the attitude out, but like, I'm so frumpy and nothing looks great on me, or whatever it is. I might start to have them do that first, and then I'd have them pull the words, and then I'd have them look. We have a list in the book, and you can find these online. I'm sure you probably have them too, but like just a list of sensations and see what they might pick. So even if they're like, oh, interesting, when I'm hating on my body, I feel really buzzy in my thighs. My
There you
thighs
go.
feel like
That's a
they're
sensation word.
vibrating. Exactly. And they're like, oh, they're vibrating. Great. Let's learn more about what makes your thighs vibrate. When do you feel that sensation?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And just
Yeah, so
increasing
that's-
awareness around it and sitting with it. Because so often with these sensations, our default response is like ignore, suppress, shut down,
Totally.
intellectualize, right?
1,000,000,000%. And again, particularly because we're so often getting the message that we can fix it.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to stay with it and not be like, if I just had started that Pilates class, I'm sure I wouldn't be hating my thighs the way that I am. Or if I had just started playing that pickup basketball game, then maybe I wouldn't feel this way. So
Kind of some
or whatever
magical
it is.
thinking. Yeah, magical thinking. Like, if I could just fix my body, then I'd be happy.
Exactly. Because then it's if I could exactly. Then I'd fix my feelings. Those have gotten easily coupled.
Ooh, yeah.
You see? Right.
If
so
I could
for
just
you,
fix
whatever
my
you
body,
were
then
feeling on that hike, whatever you were feeling on that hike, right? Like whatever that was, do you have a sense of what you were feeling that tan line day? Like what kind of emotions you were feeling?
Yeah, it was like, oh man, what if I never get married? Like what?
Great.
Yeah, like
Great.
What if no one loves me? Right? Like what if I can't ever find a man? Like what if I'm super old when I get married? Things like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right. And once you hear those, it's like your heart just cracks open, right? Like, oh my God, who hasn't felt that?
Yeah, but this idea of like, oh, if I could only fix my body, then I could fix my feelings. But it's magical thinking. It's magical thinking. Oh,
But
if I could just look a certain way. Yeah,
right.
compelling.
It's so compelling. And so then if we're like, oh, I actually can see my negative body image as almost being a heroine or a hero to try and help me. I mean, what do we do with those feelings? Who's going to pick me? How am I going to find someone? How do I know I'm not going to be alone for the rest of my life? Not that we can't address those feelings, but if there's a quick fix for that, we're going to go for it. So to say, those are really important feelings. And who doesn't feel that way at some point in their lives? Let's figure out, what do I need? I mean, I was in a very similar position. And I remember I turned 40 and I was single and before I met my husband, and I ended up doing a yoga training. I did all this other stuff because I was like, I really want to meet people that are like at my age and or maybe not at that stage of life where they may have kids, but they're kind of doing other creative stuff. And that was really helpful. Like, how else can I tend to, if I have parts of me, bringing a little IFS, if I have parts of me that are really afraid I'm never going to meet someone, how can I take care of those parts?
Yeah.
I can show up for them and be like, oh my God, of course you guys are scared. My sister's getting married. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. I'm happy for her, and I feel really vulnerable, right? And how do I tend to my vulnerability? Maybe I start to meet more people my age who aren't married. Maybe I, reach out to some of my friends and say, let's, start going out more, whatever it might be. So learning, what do we really need to tend to what's actually coming through?
How do
that
we
our body
actually
image is
address?
trying to help with.
We address some of those deeper needs. We process those deeper feelings and emotions. And processing often just looks like acknowledging, naming, sitting with, allowing, right? Like you don't even have to fix them. But then sometimes it's like, oh, I feel lonely. I'm going to join some groups. I'm going to talk to people.
Right. And maybe, like you said, it's just, oh God, now that I realize I'm actually really scared about being the other sister that's not married. Oh, that makes so much sense. We have a whole compassion section where we really, have people say, it makes so much sense. I feel blah, 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 blah. Like, it's hard to do that, right?
Yeah,
it makes so much sense that I am standing here with 20 pairs of jeans on the floor about to cry because I'm really nervous about this date. Like, that makes so much sense instead of like, I'm just so, freaking ugly. Why can't I wear anything that looks good on a date? That's very different than like, of course I don't know what to wear on a date because I'm sad.
That's so great. Okay. Where can people find out about your approach or your book or your trainings?
Yeah. So I have our book, Body Image Inside Out. So this whole idea is we're turning our body image inside out. We're making it multidimensional. We're really wanting to get you to those deeper dimensions rather than that kind of superficial, which does matter. And we talk a lot about that. We want to feel good in our clothes and we want to feel aligned. So anyway, Body Image Inside Out is the book, and we do workshops. We do both live workshops and virtual. So that's bodyimageinsideout.com is our website. And then they can find us at Instagram, Body Image Inside Out is our handle.
That's awesome.
And we love supporting clinicians. We love supporting anybody in a body We're always learning. So we're trying to teach what we learn.
I love it.
Yeah. Thank you
Well, and I
so
think from a
much.
somatic approach, there's like just similar threads of like,
Oh,
looking
for
at,
sure.
yeah,
For sure.
so
For
it
sure.
just
For
makes space
sure.
be curious.
Yeah.
And seeing those as
yeah, yeah, yeah.
muscles, like these are skills we develop. When you say muscles, initially I was like, what does muscles mean? But I realized you're talking skills we develop. The more we practice it, the better we get at being curious.
Exactly. So it becomes more natural to be tuning in when our body image gets loud, and we can start to bring in those other muscles.
Cool. Well, cool. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for your time. Really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emma. It really was such a pleasure.
Hey, real quick, if you found any part of this video helpful, I would really appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up or share it with someone who could benefit from it today. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and take care.